as the title of this talk says, this is Fugu for non-fishies. So we've talked an awful lot in past BlinkOns about the Fugu project, and it's a project that has contributors from tons of companies on many parts of the Chromium code base. So if you're already intimately familiar with the Fugu project, this may not be the right talk for you. On the other hand, I appreciate your moral support and help later on in answering questions. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Fugu, I'm going to give a whirlwind overview of what the project is, what are we all doing here. But again, the bulk of this talk is going to be open discussion. So please be preparing questions. Okay, so what is Fugu? I think it says on several of our web pages, it's a cross-company effort, and this means it's got tons of contributions from Intel, Samsung, Microsoft, Google, with the objective of making it possible for web apps to do the same range of things that native mobile and desktop apps can do, to let users accomplish the tasks that they want to get done using the web. And while, of course, keeping the user safe by adhering to the same security and privacy tenets that the rest of the web platform provides. You can go to web.dev/fugu-status for more information. And probably the important takeaway, if this is the first time hearing about Fugu, is no, this isn't any different than any other work going into Blink or bringing any other new capability, new API to the web. This is just an umbrella term for this push on bringing the web platform up to the same level as native. But any individual API that we work on, any individual capability, goes through the same Blink and web platform process. And that's both internal to the Chromium project as well as external, going through appropriate standards organizations. If you want to get an idea of the sorts of things we've been working on, there is a lovely new tracker website, fugu-tracker.web.app. And I'm sorry, I should have been recording, so I'm going to do that now. Oh, and somebody did start recording for me. Never mind. Okay, we'll edit that out in post. Thank you. Yeah. Sam Richard put together this awesome interactive website that is populated by a number of sources, including the Chromium Bug Tracker, Chromium Status, and so on. You can scroll through it and see both the many APIs that we've shipped already as part of Project Fugu, as well as those in trial stages, both in origin trial or available behind a flag. You can also flip it into a timeline mode. That's still a little bit rocky, but you can also then see what's going out in current milestones. For example, what's just gone out in the most recent stable, what's going to be going out soon in beta, and how it's going out, whether it's going out as an origin trial or whether it's shipping to stable. See, what have we been up to? Well, we've been talking about Fugu for at least the last 6, maybe more BlinkOns. Since we kicked off the project in 2018, we've shipped a ton of new APIs. Admittedly, some of these were in flight before Fugu even started, but we'll happily promote that work. These span from things that are very PWA-centric, such as being web shared targets, things that have lots of user interface, such as the contact picker, things that are, or the web OTP mechanism, things that are a little more subtle, such as enhancements to the clipboard, device work, such as HID API, Serial API, NFC, advanced camera controls, tons of different things that were all possible on native, but not necessarily on the web. And we've got way more in flight, from things like enhanced storage, lower level control over transport, access to codecs, the multi-screen window placement API, allowing things like screen enumeration, which would allow, for example, enhancements to slide projection, so you can more easily take advantage of multiple monitors from web apps, and then a slew of work on increasing the integration between PWAs and native operating systems. Big shout out there to counterparts at Microsoft who've been driving an awful lot of this work. Go Edge team. I will highlight that it's an area where we do hit challenges. A lot of the APIs that we work on are exposing brand new things to the web. And so we'll encounter security or privacy issues that may be new and that we don't have existing patterns to solve well. Many of the APIs, for example, device APIs, when we're exposing, say, the HID API or the serial API, it's easy to pop up a chooser. And therefore, instead of the user being asked some yes or no question like, would you allow this site to do this scary thing, we can make it more directed and follow the pattern of, would you like to allow this site access to one of the following devices? And then the user is sort of implicitly choosing the device they want to grant access to. That pattern may not work in all cases. There may be capabilities that seem relatively straightforward, like has the device gone to, or has the screen locked, or has the screen unlocked, where you might want to have the web app respond, knowing that the user is no longer idle. But that brings with it some surprising privacy implications, such as what if there are two tabs that are open and suddenly they are both alerted simultaneously that the system state has changed? What are mitigations for that? Because explaining what the impact of granting this permission would be to a user is very difficult. So we're still working through some of the challenges of how exactly do we bring all of these advanced capabilities to the web while keeping users safe. And I will mention that despite some APIs seeming like great ideas, it can often be challenging if we don't have incredibly enthusiastic partners helping us drive them forward through the Blink and web platform process. So definitely, as we're kicking off new API capability work, we're going to be asking Chromies, what partners do you have lined up that are ready to test this and to give feedback on the spec and implementation? Okay, whirlwind overview. Now that you know all about Fugu, what we're doing, I wanted to open things up to questions from everybody about the project. What are APIs that we haven't even thought of that you see demand for? Where you may have seen parts of the process of how we bring things to the web or how we're discussing these new APIs that could be improved. For example, how we engage with other other browser vendors. Or maybe you think this whole Fugu thing is a crazy idea and we should, standardize the web on a set of capabilities it had a few years ago and just call it good. I want to hear from you. So please unmute yourself. If you can, introduce yourself and let's discuss.
Okay, I'll start it just to get rolling. I was just going through Run on OS login for PWAs and noticed that Chrome OS wasn't supported. And to me, that seemed like a natural place to support it. Any reason why that one is out?
I'll defer if anybody else knows off the top of their head. It may be that simply hasn't been implemented yet. But Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the challenges that we've got is that we are a project that spans many organizations, and not every organization has access to all the same development equipment. Chrome OS, developing for Chrome OS is specifically a bit of a challenge. And so what you'll see in a lot of cases is that Chrome OS may lag a release or two for certain features that have deep integration with specific operating systems. There's some features where we will, for instance, web.dev, we will have launched that on mobile first. And then we'll have some lag in bringing that to desktop. Or some of the multi-screen stuff we'll launch on desktop OSs first, and then we'll figure out if it makes sense on mobile. So we're kind of adaptive in that sense, and to the extent that there are folks like Intel or Samsung or Microsoft who are building these things and may not have Chromebooks on hand, certainly not in dev mode, to build that out. We kind of try to spread the load there, and then we all want to get to the same place as quickly as possible, but it sometimes is not synchronized. our general philosophy is to live to ship another day. So we don't, as a project, block on that, but I would expect that to happen shortly.
Yeah, I will say that very specifically, the run on login, Microsoft has been doing the bulk of the engineering work on that, including taking on some unexpected complexity around revamping how the session restore code works. So I believe the plan on that one is to bring it to Chrome OS. It just may not be ready quite yet.
It just seemed a lot like Chrome OS's kiosk mode, which went away some ages ago. Anyway, I expect there's other more interesting questions around here.
No, it's a good one. If you've got a feature that you're working on and you'd like to bring it to, you've got one target platform in mind, don't consider it necessarily to be blocking you if you need help to develop it for other platforms, if you've got something that is interesting.
Yeah. And building on that, I will say we have struggled with the question of, okay, we want to expose the native platform capabilities. What happens when not all platforms have that capability? I think barcode detection was one where we really introspected and said, you know, are we going to not ship until we can bring this to every platform? Are we going to ship a polyfill by WebAssembly on platforms that don't have this? Or are we just going to accept that it's not going to be equal on all platforms? For that one, we ended up on the latter approach. But this is something we will ask, and it comes up when, I think the bulk of the APIs we're looking at as part of Project Fugu, there are things which are fairly common across operating systems, or we expect them to be common across operating systems. When something only exists on a particular kind of hardware, or only in one operating system, then we're going to be fairly skeptical about that.
I'm wondering, is there like, hi, I'm Samuel from the World Office. So I'm wondering about, can this be a more meta type of project? Like, for example, on Linux, if I want the capability, I just install it. And then, and it's part of OS, but it's not really on the OS. So is there a similar thing where like, not everyone have to have everything with Chrome, but if someone wants it, it's easy for them to install, then you'll be running at native speed. Like, for example, scientific computing, which is something I really want. And then obviously, you can't really justify having it ship with every browser. But if it's easy to install and everything just done seamlessly, and then you have that capability, wouldn't that be nice? I'm thinking about the meta, not just like have the actual features themselves.
Yeah, I think that's something we've talked about, like over time throughout the lifetime of the Chrome project, is like, can we install features, install parts of Chrome on demand? Especially when we're looking at like, can we reduce the download size of Chrome on mobile? Can we pull things in after the fact? I don't think currently anything has tipped us over the bar for saying, okay, we will invest in modularizing Chrome and pulling things down dynamically.
There are a few features that use infrastructure called component updater today. That is, I think, the plan that people point to when they think about that kind of modular installation, where, for instance, on first use, maybe we'll download something. I'm not aware of any Fugu features that use that by default today, but it is possible for the future. There were cases, for instance, I think with WebXR, where there were potentially large binary piles of drivers or support packages that needed to be downloaded for some OSs, but not for all users. I think in general, though, we've tried to shy away from that.
It's definitely interesting in the realm of APIs that you could describe as compute bound, like barcode detection, where you could imagine that being, backing up. The operating system or the browser may already provide this functionality. Do we want to expose it to the web? Or do we want to require sites to provide it via WebAssembly, for example? If it's via WebAssembly, then, hey, we don't have to require that every browser, or we don't have to wait, developers don't have to wait until every browser supports this, and we don't have to write the standards for it. And I can look back on things that we did build into the browser that we regret, like WebSQL, where the right way forward is probably a lower level storage API, and then everybody provides their own relational database and WebAssembly. But then everybody's paying the download cost for that, because shared libraries have privacy issues. So tricky.
Maybe it's time to dust off the web shared libraries proposal.
Is anybody talking about that at BlinkOn?
It came up like 3 times in the last week, but it was after the cutoff for all of the events. So no, unfortunately, although a lot of people have been talking about it lately. I don't know what happens. It's like a year or two since we talked about it last. But in this case, it does kind of fit a lot of the use case that we're talking about and would give us a lot of opportunity to get these things at low cost for users.
Yeah. I will harken back to the slide about challenges. I think several BlinkOns ago, I was talking about, it's great if we can ship the low-level primitive APIs and then allow, privacy-preserving shared libraries to expose more ergonomic APIs to developers. One of the challenges with that approach we found is that it's very hard to explain to a user what permission you're asking for a site for a lower-level API. Like one of the APIs that we've got in play right now is the multi-screen window placement. And a higher level API, like choose the screen you want to share or choose the tab you want to share. Users understand that. If it's a question about, would you like to let this website enumerate all of your screens? Well, how does a user come to understand that question actually impacts their privacy? Because now that can be used as a fingerprinting vector. So although we're still pushing forward on that one, and I think we've come to a way to make sure that we are keeping the user informed, maintaining their privacy, and so on, while still granting that capability. Those low-level primitives for brand new capabilities, other than just compute or storage, are more challenging. So we may end up shipping the higher-level APIs instead in many cases. Other questions?
So you mentioned polyfill. Is there like more formal ways to do that, or is it still completely ad hoc right now?
I do not know if there's anything more formal than people just grading their libraries, sticking them up on NPM. Specifically for the Fugu APIs, when we're really talking about things the web fundamentally cannot do, polyfills are impossible in many cases. And the things where you can provide a polyfill because it really is just compute, then it's always like, is this really Fugu? I know that I think one of the later talks at BlinkOn, maybe today or not, is talking about some additions to Canvas, specifically where, well, you could download a large library. So it is possible today, but we'd like to expose more Canvas functionality so that you don't have to download that. And I think that's a case where, I wouldn't call it Fugu, although I'm chatting with them. The line is blurry. But that's a case where we may start off by trying to implement the desired API as a polyfill. But again, that's, it's kind of on the edge of, is that Fugu or not? It's something which is built into the browser or built into the operating system that we're just trying to plumb through. But it's not fundamentally a new capability because it just requires a bunch of code. It doesn't require the OS. But that is an interesting case. Yeah, Mason, go ahead.
Thanks. Shifting gears just a bit, I'm curious if you want to talk a little bit about interop. I noticed I'm browsing through this Fugu tracker, which is really cool. It has all the platforms, which is great, but it'd be really interesting to see another column of other browser support for these things.
That is an excellent question. And please,
do you want me to take it?
Sure, go for it.
So Fugu is a Chromium project, and we do all of our work in public, in the open, through the normal Blink process. We write explainers. We want things to eventually land in a working group and get the full protection of a chartered venue. At the same time, it's also a coalition of the willing. It is unfortunate from my perspective, and this is just me speaking personally, that the set of organizations that want to push the web forward have all seemed to sorted themselves into the silo of primarily contributing to Chromium. And so it is the case that we've got Microsoft, Intel, Samsung, Google, lots of other folks pouring work into Fugu to press us forward, in part because we've sent the flare up, we've sent the signal that we want to go forward. So lots of browsers will ship Fugu features, but not many implementations exist in most of these cases. And this is a tension that we live with uncomfortably, but it is also something that we are conscious of. And so, the project is called Fugu because we know that these features are dangerous. And if you cut the blowfish wrong, you can kill the patient or the person eating it. So it's important for us that we treat the responsibility of eventual interoperability quite seriously and dot I's, cross T's, write tests, write specs, write good explainers, take tag feedback, and most importantly, pay attention to developer input as we go. So you'll see almost all of these APIs run through origin trials as a result.
Yeah, and building on that, the reason that we build web platform tests and we write specs for these things is to enable other browsers to fast follow. And we encourage that as developers look at these APIs, web developers look at these APIs, if they're interested in using them, that's going to provide competitive pressure to the other browser vendors to try and follow. And we want to make that as easy as possible.
Yeah, I will say that it's not like we're not asking for feedback. We maintain the discipline of continuing to ask. And so when we get it and someone is interested in working with us to change the shape or change the trajectory of the API's design, we're extraordinarily interested and grateful for that feedback. It's not like we're saying, we're off in space and never to be heard from again. We understand that there's always the potential. We always have the hope that others will work with us.
Yeah.
I wonder, do Electron or Node.js kind of like feed potential features or contribute?
Yeah, I don't know if Jeremy Apthorpe has made it to this talk, but we've had good contributions from folks who have been involved in those projects. And early in the lifetime of Fugu, we have gone through the sort of popular plugins and capabilities from Cordova and Electron to try to understand what developers want. And it is our hope that to the extent that we can solve those problems effectively for folks, that we will be able to all pitch in together into a single code base. Is that working out? I guess we would have to go ask our users, but we hope that Electron developers will find it possible to contribute to this work too.
For the audience, anything that we've brought to the web or talked about bringing to the web as part of Project Fugu that surprised you? We're turning that around. Anything that we haven't mentioned that you're surprised? Why doesn't the web have such and such an API?
Well, I'm talking a lot. One thing I'm surprised is we don't have anything that kind of goes back to the web as a polyfill. For example, Stadia does gaming, but inside of a box. So why can any computation be done on the server side, but we provide some API to go back to that?
Maybe you're familiar with the WASI project. There are a lot of server-side folks who are looking, or like Node, for instance, is using a lot of the work that went into V8, obviously. There is active development on the server side using runtimes that browsers have pioneered in terms of alignment with web APIs. That tends to happen at the language level more than the API shape. But there's a lot of investment in the web, and my hope is that folks get more benefit from using the same APIs over time.
Thanks.
So I guess one of my challenges is that I think you should be able to do anything here. Like it is basically a runtime, and I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to open up some kind of an extension mechanism where people can install custom extensions that would migrate in to the capabilities. And I think the extension ecosystem is kind of already providing that, at least for desktop. That if you've got, I experiment on weird devices all the time, and I would love to be able to just integrate them into the web easily, and make kind of the web the only way to program them. And outside of doing it as extensions, well, I guess my question would be, what is your opinion on hacking the browser with extensions versus the well-lit path of Fugu?
That is a good provocative question.
Can I jump in briefly on
Sure,
this one?
go for it.
So I have some background with the extension team years ago, and granted, this anecdote is a few years old. Speaking with Devlin, who is one of the specific leads on the extensions effort, the extensions got a little bit muddled in the past, offering both the ability to modify the way the browser worked and to enhance the web platform. We also made a big push years ago to make Chrome apps. And the Chrome apps platform specifically was about enabling these additional things on top of the web platform, and to move fast because we needed to solve things for Chrome OS, and then to bring those back to the web, which we're doing now. As we started bringing things back to the web platform, there was a design decision that we don't really want extensions to be a mechanism for extending the web platform. We want extensions to focus on the browser and the browser capabilities. And some of the original design and extensions was also made it more complicated to do things like bring it to mobile and make sure that it was very performant. And so the extensions API design and philosophy has been actually moving away from kind of generic web platform modification and more towards very focused browser functionality extensions, content monitoring, adding additional capabilities on specific sites, etc. So you can do it. There is a communication pipe. You can use extensions to solve this problem, but it also requires very broad permissions that pose security and privacy risks. So from a developer experimentation point of view, there's a reasonable match there, but deploying widely such that anybody who shows up at example.com, if they're asked to install this extension, the web platform can now do something else. We've run into difficulties finding a solution that we were happy with there.
Okay. We're going to have to wrap it up for time because the next breakout are starting momentarily, but thank you all for coming with questions. Thanks, Vince, for taking notes, and enjoy the rest of BlinkOn.